Hi, guys. Welcome to What on New Earth. My name is Debbie Dubois, and like you, I am a creator being awakening to this insane place we call planet Earth. And we're gonna have a little conversation today with my friend Hamish Bartholomeaus. Did I get that right?
You did. Well done.
Oh my gosh, I never know if I'm going to. Um, for those of you who saw last week, we did a video on twin flames. If you have not seen that video, I'm going to put it up in the card and put a link to it. You might want to check out that video before you see this, but if you find yourself here with us, you may want to watch this. Basically what we decided was so much has been happening over the last 7 days. We wanted to do kind of an update because energies are moving so fast right now from an ascension standpoint, and we have written, like, I had written down notes and tried to piece together what's happened in the last 7 days, and it's been almost impossible to nail anything down because it keeps shifting. But so much is happening that we did want to do an update video. So yeah, that's what we're here to do. And first of all, I guess for those of you who didn't see the video, I'm just going to give you a very quick recap. um I don't know, maybe it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Hamish was talking about a pattern that he saw that I instantaneously knew had affected me in terms of twin flames. And as we started investigating, we started to realize, wait a minute, maybe this is a lot more widespread than we thought. So we did a video about it. We had a great conversation for over an hour. And we were surprised that it was really well received. We had a lot of people reach out. And so we kind of knew we were onto something. Um, Probably the best way to move forward in this video is just to let's recap. Let's look back, Hamish, at what happened to you after the video. What people reached out to you? What kind of things were you getting?
Yeah, yeah. I got quite a few people reach out, either just wanting advice or wanting sessions. But a lot of people reaching out just to say, we saw you talking and it resonated, and do you think I need a session? This is the situation I'm in. Could I have a session, or just wanting a chat? And and it just brought home that it was a lot more widespread than we might have thought that it was, and which was interesting. That people, once we spoke about it and framed it in a few different ways, because I think that's what the last conversation we had was about, is not just bringing the piece forward, but then framing it in a couple of different ways for people. So one way might not resonate with them, but when you look at it from another way, you're like, oh yeah, that kind of fits. Maybe there is something there, because not everyone's the same. There's always different variations.
That's what I
Um,
found too. That's what I found. I mean, I had people reach out from Facebook because I had posted in the group. I had friends of mine chat me up on just regular text message and say, "Oh my God, I saw that." Um, and even Telegram, you got emails. And
yeah,
so, yeah, I think the biggest thing that came from that was the realization. I mean, I kind of suspected that I guess maybe where we were at the time, because it had just happened.
mm,
We're talking about a twin flame attack, basically, a attack
yeah,
that happened between 2009 and 2012. So, of course, the questions started running through my mind. Oh my God, was I hit? And if you had told me 3 weeks ago that I was not in a true twin flame connection, that it was a false twin, I would have never believed you. I would have
mm,
said you don't know what you're talking about. But it's kind of like, so it first it was how I received it. And then I was thinking so much of the people that I've worked with over the years and how they were behaving. So imagine all of this. Talk about having access to records, like we're getting more access to records. It's like I was flooded with all of these realizations at the same time as realizing I'm still suffering trauma that needs to be dealt with. So after that
Yeah.
video, a lot happened for me personally. And I think one of the first things that I did with you was say, okay, I need to get through like some healing pieces of this, because of course everything just started going haywire in how I was looking at it. So it really affected me significantly personally before we even got into all these other people that are reaching out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if this is a good time to talk about. Well, what I do want to do is I do want to get into like some of the healing and some of the things that were brought up. But before we do that, I think in our conversation, we started realizing that there were, what do you want to call it? Some things that were systematic, like when we
Mm.
looked at it from a bigger standpoint, like we just said, it was seemed to be like a system-wide thing. Don't you think so?
Yeah. It looked like it was a play, like if it was a football game, it was a particular play. It was a maneuver on the battlefield, how you want to look at it. But it was definitely an orchestrated movement. I mean, you could call it an attack, but that's what it seemed like. And it wasn't, because no one, I mean, it wasn't even on my radar in 2012 at
Right.
all, or even 08, 09. I was focusing on other things, but from your knowledge of back then, we kind of pieced together what looked like there was a lot that came in around that time leading up to 2012 and then on from there. And it just seemed like that's when it really peaked, like the flat earth stuff. The flat earth stuff came out of nowhere. No one was talking anything about it. And then within
Right.
6 months, everyone was talking about it. And
Right.
the twin flame stuff was the same. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden someone coined the phrase twin flame, and off it went. And it wasn't that, I don't think that someone came up with the term. It was that everyone resonated with it because it was happening to all these people.
Exactly. And it's very hard to deny when you see it happening or you experience it yourself, and then you
Yeah.
start talking to other people that are experiencing it. Um, I wanted to say that, I was putting together as I was talking to people, because of course I have a lot of connections with people who've been on the twin flame path, that many of them, well, I want to say it in this way. Many of them have gone beyond that relationship. They've let go of that relationship. And we discovered there's still an aftermath. And we can get into that in a minute.
Mm.
There's still an aftermath. Even though they felt like they were healed, there was something, and we were talking about this right before we recorded. We'll get into that about
Mm.
trauma, the aftermath of what we experienced.
Yeah.
um but there seemed to be a different flavor of attacks, and what's a better word for it than attack? What did you call it? Maneuver?
Yeah, it feels like a maneuver. Like you could see it as an
Yeah,
attack, but it's just a
I
maneuver
like your
with.
word better.
Yeah, and it seems to, like there's trauma involved in it, but for different reasons. Like we
Right.
found out, like some people are in a marriage, and then this spiritual, emotional, very physical thing comes in from someone else. And so the trauma there is what happens in the marriage. Well, then all the things that aren't working in the marriage come right up to look at you. And so there's all of that goes on. But maybe you're not in a marriage, but this person comes up, and you have this connection, and the trauma's in a different way. Or maybe you're on opposite sides of the world
Oh, that was a
and this
big one.
connection comes
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Right.
And so it's never even going to be physical, even though the physicality is kind of like the most intense part, which is the driver of the whole thing. So no matter how the trauma happens, the other thing I was thinking of was two people get thrown together, and there's no reason why it wouldn't work, but it just seems like maybe it was too soon.
That's what
Like,
I was getting too. Yep.
yeah,
Where people would be brought together too soon. Like even like they might have been on the way to meeting already.
mm,
And I even thought, there are probably counterparts that this happened to.
yeah,
And it seems like the major part of the overlay was the physical,
yeah,
because I mean, the stories I'm hearing is that, they would have been good foundational relationships. You said that in the first video about one of your clients, that it would have been a good relationship. But
mm,
this sexual piece was so off the charts that
mhm,
it puts you, I want to say, almost in animal mode. I hate to put it that
yeah,
way because I think
yeah.
animals are probably less sexual than than this
Mm,
kind of energy. But
yep.
and so it was just wreaking havoc in many different ways. And I love that term maneuver because I don't want to give it that power. We've talked a little bit
No.
about that too. We don't want to give it the power of um, such a negative yeah, okay. So they
Mm,
had some maneuvers. Well, we had some of our own maneuvers,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And part
yeah.
of the, I mean, a major part of the trauma aftermath or the PTSD, because as we said earlier, and I'll just touch on it briefly,
Yeah.
with trauma training, trauma is not the point. Like people, it's not like breaking a window just to see how the glass falls on the ground. Like that's very rare to, I would almost say that never happens like that. There's always something else behind driving
Mhm.
that behavior, wanting it to happen. And trauma is about training. It's about the response you get after the trauma and going on and on and on. And every now and then you've got to nip back in and reinforce the trauma just to remind, but it's, and then you go on and then you reinforce it a bit more. And I mean, this is how people train animals. This is how the military does it. This is how the education system does it. It's not an unknown thing. We just don't call it trauma. We call it training. But it is trauma training, like you're training with trauma. And so it's not about the trauma. It's about what are they training you? How are they training you to behave? Like with an elephant, you put that big chain on them when they're really young and you traumatize them around that chain and train them in such a way that you only really need a very fine rope or a bit of string to hold them when they're much older, because there's so much trauma around breaking the chain, pulling on the chain, having the chain tight, that they never even test the rope because they've got this inbuilt physical, emotional
Mhm.
trauma bond with the rope never gets tight. The rope, you don't pull on it, you don't ever, and you can keep an elephant chained up with a bit of string, basically, as long as they can see that it's there or feel that it's there, they're never going to pull on it and run away, even though they could pull on it, run away, and smash half the town down as they went. They're so big and strong. They've been traumatized into a response. And so it's not about the trauma, it's about what's the trauma, how's the trauma trying to get you to behave? And that's the bit that you need, that is worth looking at, is if this twin flame thing, and we're not saying it is, like we're just saying let's just ask the question, because maybe you'll feel into it and it isn't, and everything's great and it's no problem. But you can ask the question, if I got into this relationship and it was being engineered from the outside somehow as a trauma control situation, how do I behave now since the relationship?
And I got to tell you, I have two people that are in contact with me that literally are still in trauma and going into therapy to deal with the trauma, and it seems to be
Yep.
related. For those people who have been through that experience like on a regular basis, I want to say twins in union,
Mm.
twins that are in constant contact with each other, whether or not they're, together or not. But it seems to me that part of that program was actually those energies kept coming through. You know what
Every
I
time
mean?
that every time the private messenger goes bing bing, it reinforces the behavior, even
Yep.
if the behavior is secrecy because you're in a relationship with someone else. Like whatever
Right.
it is, like every time you get that contact, it's a reinforcer.
Right.
which is why I think these unions that are, that we call in twin flame, whatever we want to call them,
Right.
they seem to build like a bonfire. Like the intensity just builds and builds and builds because it's just getting reinforced constantly, and it just becomes like this out of control spiral. And
Right.
I've seen that. Like I didn't know what I was looking at, but I've seen that happen in
You've
people.
seen the energies of that,
Yeah, I have, and I
like the
wasn't
patterns.
aware of it, but now I can pin it to this, like whether we're
Right.
calling twin flame, false twin flame, whatever. But that that situation where you are spiritually and energetically aligned to someone in such a beautiful way, and then something just injects this physical, like you said, almost animal, like bonfire gets
Right.
injected in, and it just, the flames of that just engulf everything.
Everything. And it burns everything to the ground.
Yeah.
Now, I think that one of the things that I realized though is that, I think the goal in this maneuver was to
Mm.
try to derail the front run.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This quick awakening.
Mm.
I think that, I remember being given the term catalytic heart awakening by my guidance. And
Mm.
I think that was a double-edged sword. I think that, yes, we have really moved forward quickly, like having to, really step into our power. A lot of people had to learn because in most of these connections, they didn't work the way they were. They didn't end up the way people wanted them to. They never
Yeah.
had the happy fairy tale ending. It's
Mm.
always, it used to be the runner chaser. The second someone was really feeling, they were feeling it together, then one would run for the hills, the other would be just devastated. And so there's that trauma again.
Mm.
Some twins that were together would just fight all the time and be at each other's throat or have constant interference in the connection. There's so many different flavors of it, but the bottom line is it didn't ever work out the way we thought it would.
Yeah.
Where's my fairy tale ending? But what but what it did was we had to survive somehow. The pain, the angst, the trauma of it not working out, the trauma of being super attached to a particular person,
Mm.
obsessive thoughts, obsessive behaviors. And I'm just speaking, I'm kind of like going through in my mind's eye, like a bunch of different people I know that went through this with
Yeah.
me.
And like we said before, like that sort of obsessive, yesterday, I think we said those obsessive thoughts and behaviors, like that can spiral into taking yourself out. Like you can just jump off a roof. It can get so compounded on itself that you can see there's absolutely no other way out because you just can't picture anything else. You get so walked into the corner of the room that all you can see is the corner of the room, and the
Right.
only way is to kill yourself. It can get that. And
Or
you talking about survival is that, like, if you get out the other side, it's pure survival to get out the
right.
other side of a situation like that. It's not pretty.
And you end up in a situation where you're just ridden with anxiety. In
Yeah.
some cases people like had just constant anxiety.
Mm.
um Others just felt like really insecure. So these were the traumas that I think
Mm.
happened. But over time, depending upon the different situations, what I saw in almost every case is people recovering from that original relationship. There were some who were longer term, so that didn't happen. But those who lost in abandonment kind of thing, like someone just ran away and they never could get together with them,
Mm.
most of those people healed that need for a person by filling themselves up. So I saw a lot of people learning how to love themselves. I saw a lot of
Mm.
people breaking codependent marriages or unhealthy marriages with where they weren't
Yeah.
happy, and they even if that meant going out on their own and being alone and having to provide for themselves. Some were supported from their exes, and some were just like, I don't care, I've got to do this and find a way to support myself. So I think that while the objective was to play a big, huge maneuver on the forerunners, meaning the people who are awakening first, this thing catapulted them into a quick awakening. That's why it was called catalytic awakening. But at the same time, I do think that, so each of those people kind of felt healed, felt stronger, felt more themselves, maybe even got to know themselves for the first time. Like they finally, like, I know me, I learned who I really was and what I'm really made of. So there were a lot of positives. And I think that a lot of twin flames that have been through that whole path, they pride themselves in, look at how much better off I am now because I went through this and I did the work. And I think that that's what you'll find is a lot of us are like, hey, we've done the work. You know, the masculine, what work have you guys done? You know, because we've seen so many masculine that just are like, you know, not like you in that they're not looking at the nature of reality, and they're not, you know, like just coming from a shamanic place. That so I guess what I wanted to say, once we go from there, gosh, what was I thinking?
Well, I think what's interesting about that to me is that there's a, like, that argument didn't ever sit well with me, that see, this was for my own good. Like, it was terrible and it was very traumatic, but it was the way to do it, and I came out the other side, and it was the best thing for me. And that I'm not saying that's wrong. What I'm saying is that sounds like someone who was sent to an English boarding school in grade 3 and just had to make the best of it. And because they survived and they made it out the other side and lived some sort of life.
It was good.
Yeah, they didn't kill themselves. They say, look, it was a good experience for me. And I'm like, well, I don't.
I don't agree.
The way I look at it, I mean, the way I approach it in here is chaos is not a necessary energy, I don't think. A lot of people think it is, like chaos and destruction. Like you need destruction so you can build new things, and yin and yang. And I'm like, from my point of view of, not that this place is meant to be a prison, but that it operates like a prison right now, and we are prisoners in a way. My point of view to that is, there are much better ways to demolish a building than a wrecking ball, than chaos. Right. It's slower to take it apart brick by brick. But the interesting thing about taking it apart brick by brick from the top down is you can start building your new structure as you take down the old structure. Whereas a wrecking ball just comes through, smashes the whole thing down. It's really quick. Hey, and if you use demolition charges, you can drop it down in its own base. Like, it's really neat and it's really quick. You can't use any of those materials to rebuild with.
Right.
None of it. It's all written off. The whole thing is a write-off. So I can see how people who've been living in a realm where there is corruption and destruction and chaos and it's not the word that I wanted. I'm like looking for disharmony is also not the word I want, but, you know, distortion.
Distortion is what I was thinking.
We're in a realm where there is distortion, and it's kind of like, oh, well, you just make the best of it. We'll use distortion in a way that we can benefit from. And to me, that doesn't, like, no, that's just playing by their rules. Like, there is a better way. And I know that when you've lived through it and come out the other side, it's hard to see a different way of doing it.
I agree.
I don't know who I would be if I didn't go through that situation. And
that's what I feel like sometimes.
Yeah. And my counteraction to that is, who you think you are is an imaginary being in your head anyway. So
that's true.
Who would you be? Like, who you think you are is not who I think you are. So, so you're just a created persona in your head or heart or wherever you feel like you reside. So who would you be if you got exactly to where you are now without the trauma? You don't even need to know.
Nice.
Yeah,
Can we,
but you don't
can we have
even
a
need to know
do-over?
who, like
Right.
how. You say, well, how would that even be possible that I would get here without the trauma? And my response to that would be, that's right. Maybe you'd actually be even further down the road without the trauma.
Oh, I'm
Maybe the
sure.
trauma, yeah, maybe the trauma slowed you down. So you can say that the trauma made you stronger, but you don't actually know that.
I agree
You
with you.
you're just kind of feeling that, well, I'm going to make the best of a bad situation, which is fantastic. And you should make the best of a bad situation, but don't give the trauma or the distortion an excuse to exist. Because
Right.
I don't think it needs to exist. I
Right.
think we can do it a different way. And no one, like the young child or the baby or whatever, they don't choose to be traumatized.
Hmm.
That's fine. Like I absolutely, there are many horrific situations that go on in here daily.
Right.
And when you do finally get to the point where you can make a choice, then what are you going to choose?
Right.
Because if you're going to fall back on, well, I was traumatized at such a young age, I didn't have a choice, then the trauma conditioning has worked perfectly because
Hmm.
you've just given yourself no choice. You've
Hmm.
said it happened at such a young age, I had no choice in it. That's horrible. And so this whole so I'm just going to curl up in a ball in the corner. And
Hmm.
that's okay. You can do that. But that's probably why you were traumatized at that age.
Right.
So that it could be controlled. So I
Right.
mean, and that's my contrary nature. Like I know there are people that don't agree with that, and there are people who have been through horrendous things who would say you don't know what I've got to overcome to even get to that point. And I agree with that. But my contrary nature is if someone says, I'm going to I'm going to beat you until you curl up in a corner and you don't stand up again, well, the only reason I wouldn't stand up is because I'd been knocked out. Like I will keep standing up. If someone's trying to force me to do something or manipulate me in a way to do something, I will absolutely make sure I do not that. I do
Right.
something
I'm a little
instead.
bit of that flavor myself. Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure there's people that will attest to that. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, the more you want to control me, the less it's likely to happen.
that's
But
the
that's
one.
the frustrating part too, is, when you get into situations where, even though you're that kind of person, you still fall prey to the programming and all of
Yeah,
that. And I
we've
think
still
that
got our triggers.
where this leads us to is the healing piece. And I think that was one
Yeah.
of the reasons we wanted to do this, is that we have all kinds of stuff to say about the healing piece, don't we, Hamish? It's
Yeah.
like there's so
Yeah.
many aspects of the healing piece because we've been through like so much, and then another phase that we're in. So I think maybe I think it would be a good idea to talk about the fact that there are people that are still carrying trauma from
Mm.
that particular pattern.
Yeah.
It's very likely that the pattern that was put on each person was probably well matched to your core wounds. So, however you I'm pretty sure that the strategy or the maneuver was to take a look at someone's energy across time, who they are, what they've been through, and where are they vulnerable, and how can we create more of where they're vulnerable, and how could, because that would be the way to control, right?
Mm.
And let's pair them up with this person, that person, whatever. It seemed like it was pretty coordinated.
Mm.
So when this happened, um, we ended up with a situation where it's like some some of this stuff brought up really deep core wounds, which
Mm.
need to be healed anyway, regardless. Um, and I think that's what I started to realize for me personally, is that in
Mm.
order to move beyond what you want to call the situation to where I would not feel that what do you want to say? It was healed. Big
Yeah.
pieces
You will.
started coming up for me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You to the place where you can't be controlled by that behavior anymore.
Right.
Someone can behave like that because if and there's a saying around it which I can't remember, but it's something along the lines of if someone does something to you that makes you behave in a certain way, then they are your controller.
Right.
And so you kind of want to get yourself to a spot where someone can behave in that way to you. Anyone can behave in that way to you, and you won't just take the bait straight away.
Right.
But then you're in control, not them.
Right. You're back in the steering wheel. And I think that the first thing, and this is just kind of giving people, as always, I am always willing to open up and share my personal experiences, making sure everyone understands I'm right there in there with you. And so I'm really willing to share just one of the things that turned out to be a very major piece of a healing piece for me. And I identified this with many other people having the same aftermath as to why don't you stop like fixating? Why don't you let go of the connection? What is it that keeps you there? And I think that this is where I started to work with my inner being. Showers, I will say it again. I get in the shower and I feel like I'm really connecting. And I'm pretty sure that I discovered this piece before I had a conversation with you, Hamish. I found the peace myself in the shower. And what I did was, and I'm saying this for any of you out there who still feel like you do carry trauma, and you may not, and that's great. I hope you don't. If you do, this is just sort of an example of how you can begin this healing process yourself. It's I just sort of went into the shower in my hand on my heart, and I said, what is it in the situation that makes it difficult to let go? Because in my mind, I can let go. I can see it all. I can be rational, but what is it inside of me that keeps me in this space, And I got the answer right away, which was really, this is the work that when you get working with your inner being, it's just amazing to get these answers so fast.
Yeah.
And it was just like, no one else. It's this belief. What do I believe? I believe that there's no one else out there that I would ever have this feeling with, that there's nobody else out there that would love me as much as this person did, that would be attracted to me the way this person was, that would be, put me on a pedestal in some ways the way this person did. So I had all of these feelings of, okay, so bottom line is that this was such a special relationship, and I didn't think it would exist anywhere else. I didn't think anyone else could fill that bill. So once I had that piece, then I didn't know what to do with it, right, Hamish? I was like, okay, now I got the piece. So sometimes, this is what it can look like. Some of you may find the piece and you're like, oh yeah, man, okay, I'm good. I didn't really know what to do with it. And that's where Hamish came in. So Hamish, how did we work? I want to allow you to elaborate a little on like what kind of work you did with me to help me out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of this work, these pieces that we're talking about are, I mean, you can call them implants or you can call them, they're usually holographic in nature. So they're astral or they're etheric. They're there, but they're not there. Can't really see them, but when you look at them in the right way, you can. But you absolutely know they're there, like you can feel them. And like you say, when you go looking, when you can get connected to yourself and go looking, you can really find them. And it doesn't have to be this. It can be anything. Like it can be your grandmother telling you that money doesn't grow on trees. Like that's a program. That's a holographic program that gets inserted in your ear and just rattles around, and maybe it doesn't and you deal with it, but that could be a program that you're running from. And so the way to frame this would be that you had a fear program inserted into you somehow. And that's the classic trauma bond way of doing it. Just to let people see how you would do that is you would really hyper love someone. You'd really like pour it right on, like really give them more than you could sustain, like really, really work it. And then just pull back and then give it to them again and then just pull back. And it's right. Like almost like a drug addiction. Like right. What you're getting is not actually real because no one could sustain that level of interaction long term, not even the person who's giving it to you, but they're giving it to you like that, and then they're withdrawing it, giving it to you and withdrawing it, and they're training you to feel that only they can give it to you, because you're not getting that from anyone else
Right.
around you.
Right.
And then even if they didn't give it to you for the next 5 years straight, you'd have this memory that they could. It's possible. So maybe you're doing the wrong thing. Maybe they're just in a bad mood. Maybe you'll make all these excuses, because people who are addicted to drugs make all these excuses for when
Right.
they would get that one hit in 100 or 1,000 or whatever that they get, that goes, oh, and it's that hyper real hit again. And so
Right.
that's I mean, drugs train you. Drugs, you can train yourself with drugs. It's like trauma
Well,
training.
I want to interject in here too, is that, remember, we're talking about the energy working through people, and their template, like their overlay, is feeding into that. So it's not like a
Absolutely.
judgment on the person themselves,
Oh no,
because they're
no.
they're not doing any of it intentionally. Most of the time they don't even know what the hell they're doing. It's
No.
just they're being completely controlled by an overlay. And if they haven't gone in to look at it and they haven't seen it, they're going to think it's just the way I am.
And as you pointed out, we're all susceptible in different ways. If we weren't susceptible, we'd be walking through walls or flying, and we're not there yet.
Sign me
Or
up.
if you are, you're probably not watching YouTube if you're there at that point. So
Right.
we can safely assume the audience isn't there. I know that we're not. And so everyone is susceptible to this in their own particular way. And you touched on that briefly when you said the past life thing, and whether we're going to buy into the idea of past lives being real, or maybe they're just a holographic simulation internally in us as well. Doesn't matter. It works the same either way. But you've got this kind of known lineage in linear time. And so if you've been attacked or worked on in a certain way here, then it can be reinforced here and then here and then. And I'm not saying that because I think that's how it will work. I'm saying that because when I go in to help people heal themselves with trauma, that's how it presents. It presents like a stack of dominoes.
Okay.
And it'll be, the last domino will be in this life, and there might be 5 dominoes behind it, and there might be 500 dominoes behind it. And you can go to any one of those dominoes and it'll be a different life, a different body, a different time, but it's the same energy that's getting
Right.
them. And you go all the way back to the very first domino, and that's where that energy interacted with you the first time. And so
Right.
this is not an intellectual idea from me. This is actually how I teach people how to heal themselves, is
Right.
in this way. This is how it seems to present, is that same energy will keep meeting you in a slightly different way, because you're in a slightly different body in a slightly different time, but it's the same template meeting the same template all the way down the line. And it might have only been short, but it can be quite long. It just
well, and
depends.
that doesn't mean that the manipulation that the twin flame community had was throughout the course of time.
No,
It just
no.
means this was put on us at the end point when we're getting ready to, move on up in consciousness, to stop us from doing that. But they used that information. It seems.
Yeah, that's what it appears like. You're a boxer, and you fought 200 boxing matches before now. You've had 200 lives, or two. Like, look at it that way.
Right.
Whoever engineered this maneuver studied your form in every single fight you ever had, and they found your weak point, and then they hit you at the weak point. And
isn't that
just how it is.
So just love those little devils.
Yep.
All right.
They're so smart.
So going back to the healing aspect. So
yes.
Then what I was able to do, and this is just for people's information, how we can find these things is we first have to just be able to feel the energy. I remember you telling me, don't worry about what lifetime, what situation, whatever, just go in and feel the energy of it, and then ask when you
Yeah.
first experienced it, right? Is that how
Yep.
did we did this actually in person in a
That's
session?
how we did it.
Right.
We
And it
did.
was
Yeah, that's how we did
interesting.
it. So
And I'll just give an example.
yeah.
So I had two people immediately show up. That was the only two people. I had a little girl show up whose dad had raised her like until the age of 8. Her mom had died at birth, and he died. And when I came upon her, she was at the funeral. And I want to just say that this happened so fast that
Mm.
it was like minutes, felt like a
Yeah.
big, long period of time. It happened so fast.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, I was with this young girl who was devastated at the loss of her daddy, basically. And it was like the funeral, and she was by herself, and there was no relatives. And I was quickly given the information that she was going to go off to orphanage and be, probably, I got the sense, abused and all this stuff. So what I did was, Hamish, were you the one that told me, like, okay, what to do now? You told me to do something in particular. You said,
Yeah. Well, you kind of ask what to do in that situation, but I mean, the first thing any human would do if they came across a child like that is they would put their arm around them and say it's okay. Like,
right.
I know I can't fix what's happened here, but I'm here with you. It's all
And
right.
that's what I
We're here.
did. I felt myself. It's interesting because I was not doing this, but this other aspect that was also needing to be healed now almost gets
Mm.
me emotional. She sat
Mm.
down with her. I could see her with her white gloves, and she sat down with her in the angelic light, and she pulled the little girl in her lap, and she had a conversation with her, and she told her how she was going to love herself, and that people were going to love her, and that she was going to have an amazing, wonderful life. And instantaneously, I knew that that piece was healed. So it was me giving me, from a different aspect, even what I needed in that
Mm.
lifetime. And that's how I saw it. I didn't feel the pain of the little girl. I didn't feel the loss of the daddy, but I knew that that was where this came from. That was one aspect. Switch quickly over
Mm.
to the other. It was a lifetime I had remembered, where I was a school teacher. I was prim and proper. I was a spinster. I didn't think I was ever going to get married. And someone came into town, swept me off my feet, kind of like you'd think of the twin flame situation being. I was on cloud 9, thought nothing could ever make me feel this way again. And I came upon the person cheating on me. So immediately that person, the school teacher, basically went off and killed herself in that lifetime. So same kind of thing. I felt this time, I felt my own presence going in, not another aspect of me, but I felt my own presence going in, following her. Oh my God, I don't want to get emotional again. But following her and making sure that she was loved, and making
Mm.
her see that he's not worth it. He's not
Mm.
worth it. Nothing is worth that. And instilling in her self-love, and I'm here for you, and I'll talk to you, and we'll get through this together. And there could very well be another person in your life, but even if not, you're enough. And I
Yeah.
believe that that changed the course of that lifetime as well. So that's just a little bit of an example of pulling in some of the fragments in my situation, which really,
Yeah.
it really, just those two things, I don't want to
It
say I'm
accelerated a
cured,
lot.
but
Yeah, but it accelerated a lot for you, like a lot. It unraveled a lot, like in the next few days after that.
Yes.
And to add to that, the reason why we went looking was because we had removed the etheric implant, like the actual thing, as if you could see that there was a tick on your neck, or we'd actually gone in and removed the program that was running in Debbie's body now.
Right.
We'd gone in and energetically removed the program that was running, the fear program that said no one will ever love you like that person loves you.
Right.
And our whole conversation around it was, well, actually, no one can ever love you like you can love yourself.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And we need to, and then we removed that. But after you remove that, it's like, well, what the conversation we had before is like, well, how did that energy even get into you in the first place? Where was the damage point? There might have been a damage point or a weak link or a traumatization over time that let that get in. And that means that if we don't heal that weak link, even though we've removed the fear program, someone could come and put another one on you, or you could call it back to yourself. Like that
That's
also
bigger.
happened.
That's
Yeah.
bigger. I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've done that, I think, to some degree,
Yeah.
called stuff back in
You
because
can
it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
And we like there's certain when you work with some people, you know that there's this really magnetic attraction to the thing you've removed, and you kind of have to not talk about it at all, like as little as possible, because even the act of talking about it with them, they'll bring it back in because it's such a comfortable, familiar feeling.
And
You've got
that
to be
was,
super careful.
I want to, right now is a good point to bring this in. That was one of my concerns, even in us talking about this situation and finding the overlay at all, because a lot of people have demagnetized, desensitized. They might not have removed the template, but it doesn't mean that they weren't functioning really well. And of course, do you want to bring energy to it? However, I guess this kind of gets into what we wanted to talk about, which is the overlays kind of being, you want to talk about that? What we kind of, you know
give
what
me
I'm
more.
talking about? Athena's video that she just put out. I mean, are we ready to talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Did
So
we get to a good space to talk about that?
yeah,
Because I think that's a
yeah.
really big piece of what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, and also just as we kind of lead into that, just the idea of like healing. You know, if you're going to heal past life trauma, like we'll say past life trauma, like whatever that actually is,
Right.
we're going to go back because when you do that, it has an effect in your body, so it works. So we're just going to go with what works. You go back and you do it, but you don't work on what's happened, like the infection you've got now, like the program that's running, you won't be fully healed. If you work on the program or the infection now, but you don't work on the hole that you have in you that let the infection in, that won't work either. And I mean,
Right.
so you look at the way the body works, you get a hole in you and then you get an infection. And what the body immediately does is it fixes the hole first, so it can't get reinfected.
Right.
And then it works on and so it's a good way of looking at it. You know, we're calibrated to do that naturally. It's like you've got to do both things at once. You can remove that trauma from now, but you also can get yourself to a point where you won't get reinfected by that trauma again if you can heal what's making the hole in you.
Right.
That
Which,
seems like it's in the past. I mean, we don't know it's in the
well,
past. It's just a way of looking at it. But
it's one of the upsides. If you're gonna, let's paint it as an upside that in this process, you know, some healing takes place. That was probably the reason why they put the overlay on you in the first place, because they knew how to get to that. So
they saw the hole. They can see the hole, and
yeah.
these there are beings that they operate in that space where, you know, the programs and the overlays and the holes and all of that's visible. Now I can't just see that walking around, and I wouldn't want to be able to see it on anyone. You know, like I've got
Like,
enough
you
going on in my life. I don't need that level of interaction.
right.
But if I was to ask to see it, I'll be shown. Like if I ask what's going on with that person and I'm specific enough, unless it's being deliberately covered up, and then you've got to be really specific to find it. But usually
Right.
you can ask and it'll just show up. So I mean, if I can see it and you can see it, we're pretty damn sure these beings walking around that are hidden from us mostly, they can see all of it. Like we're working in we're blindfolded in a dark room compared to them most of the time.
Right.
So they know exactly where to hit us. They know exactly how to hit us. They know exactly when to hit us. And we, for the most part, until we start working really methodically like this, we can't see that. But the flip side of that is the more of this work you do on yourself, the better your hearing gets. You're still in a dark room, you're still blindfolded, but you can hear them coming. Like it tunes up your senses in a way, like just to work with that metaphor. But the more programs you can get off and the more healing you can do to a point, like the ones that are actually really still traumatizing you and affecting your life, that just clears space up around you, and you can just operate better. You can operate for yourself rather than just being a cog keeping this whole thing spinning.
Right. And one of the things that I think is a good time to bring up is one of the things that, and we talk about Athena, and I'll put her link below, Human Witness on YouTube. She seems to have a really good sense. Hamish, you said, and I wholeheartedly agree. I think she's looking at things from outside the construct. She's getting access to information, which she swears up and down we can access. But I do think that you have to be at a particular level of integrity to be able to access some of the stuff she's doing. And I think I do tend to think some of us have different superpowers right now, and that's one of hers. She can do that.
Yeah.
And what she delivered up, like right after we're going through all of this, she delivered up that, I'll bring this up and then backtrack, but she basically said that some of these overlays are being dealt with at the template level, and then they're rippling down through. And what I started to understand was, and this is a really big, important thing, is that we are not going through this process alone. We have, I'm sure, our greater being, which is outside the construct. I haven't got all this figured out. So, I'm not saying that I know anything, but what I'm saying is, kind of putting pieces together. At a template level, I believe it's possible that, having seen this pattern, that I don't know anyone else that had seen that pattern. Hamish, I don't have any. I mean, I've been in the twin flame community for a long time. I've never heard of this. Good friends of mine, my friends from Divine Fire, Twin Flame Divine Fire, remember the radio channel? They had not heard of any of this before. And they're really like, they're twins in union. So what I'm saying is that, there a lot of times we think about things being illuminated so that they can be released. If you don't know it's there, you can't really do anything about it. So guys, I think that in this respect, and the reason why I remember saying this in the video, the last video we did, I knew, and Hamish knew, that we just had to do the video. It was like we had to get that information out in the public domain, because actually what we were doing is seeing it so that it can be released. And one of the after effects of that, because we're all here to do different things to help clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up here so we can get the hell out of here. but what could have happened is, because it was seen now at the template level, they can bring in the erasure of this system wide. Okay. I'm feeling very strong that we've been given, what do you want to call it? The remedy. Ding, you get the remedy.
Yeah. And how that might look is individual people doing work like this. Like
that's
it's
what we
not
got
like,
to.
It's not like someone's just going to come through with a broom and sweep it through and you do nothing. And like, it actually, the way that might play out is you've got to actually muscle up and do the work. And to add the added bonus of doing the work, like you said, you need to be in a certain moral, or you need to be in integrity to be able to see this stuff. And what I learned on my journey to get to here is being in integrity isn't just being in your thoughts and your actions and your deeds, being in integrity, but it's also removing all that garbage in you that isn't you. Because no one, if you've got a bug, like an implant in you, like a physical bug that's got vision and sound hooked up to someone else, and you want to get let into the building with all the secrets, no one's going to let you in the building with the bug.
It's a good analogy.
Like, you got to get that bug off before we're going to let you in here. Like, there's no way. So it's not. And if you act in integrity, and this is probably a bit of not just the yogic path, but we're most familiar in the West, in the
Mhm.
modern West, with the yogic path of that living in a very moral lifestyle and in
Mhm.
thoughts and acts and deeds, is that stuff will eventually fall off. A lot of
Mhm.
it, a lot of the
Mhm.
lower grade stuff, because like the programs will just demagnetize from you and they'll drop away.
Right.
But that's a bit like the Reiki idea of the cup's dirty, and so you just keep pouring clean water into the cup, and eventually the cup cleans itself. You know, if you just keep
Mhm.
pouring enough love and light, clean water, clean water. Yes, that does work. But you
Mhm.
could also pick up a cloth and just clean it. And you use
Right.
a lot less water, like it,
Right.
and much faster. So so getting in and seeing where there might be some of these templates, programs, implants, whatever, that are making you behave in a way that you know isn't actually you.
And
Like,
that you're not proud of, or just, or if you're experiencing something that you know is stopping you from moving forward, if you're stuck, if you're, having
yeah,
groundhog
that's
day and
not
you keep
us.
having the same thing, it's like you've got a calling. It's like, all right, I want to
Yeah.
say this. It's kind of like you were talking about doing the work. It's
Mm.
like the way it was revealed to me is you do the work if it's affecting you. You don't go in and do the
Yeah.
work for all this other stuff. If it's
No, no,
your
no, no, no.
piece to clear, you
Mm.
clear it. And
Yeah,
and
that's
some
it.
people will not have to do that clearing because you did it. And that's called clearing for the collective. And I think that that right there is, at the template level, when they push through the solution to dissolving this, it's the active awareness of those people that came in. I don't want to say contracted to do it, but if you've got something that's stopping you from being happy, you're going to work on it.
Yeah.
If you are able to care for yourself enough, you're going to want to
Mm.
deal with it so that you don't continue to live in a place where you're unhappy or your life isn't going the way you want it to go, or whatever. So the good news is it does look like we've got some system-wide help, but
Yeah, we might only have to do, maybe only 9 people need to move that particular contract, or 90 or 900 or whatever it is. Not everyone that's got that program running or is affected by that program needs
right,
to move it. It might only be a very small core group for whatever reason. And how do you know that that's the case, that you
called,
need to, you don't need to? And this is what we talked about before, is, I mean, there's no harm in going looking in yourself to see if there's any of this stuff there. And it might not be something you need to deal with, or it might, but if you're getting the push to go and look, it's like let's say like a thorn in your sock. Every time you move the wrong way, your sock moves and it stabs into you again. It's like, oh, it's not terrible, but it's annoying. Like, this thing's really bugging me for
right.
whatever reason in my life. It just pops up in business, and then pops up when I talk to my mother on the phone, and then it pops up when I'm dealing with a child. And well, then you're kind of being asked to do something about it.
Right.
That's the knock on the door to say you are able to do this. Perhaps we should do this now.
And that's integrity, actually, because
Yeah.
that's being willing to take a look at yourself, look in the mirror, say, where have I got some stuff that's getting me stuck? But
Yep.
if I would unstick it, it would be available for everybody.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a ton of experience. Well, I say that I probably through the whole twin flame path did quite a bit of purging and clearing for the collective. But, I remember, and I think I mentioned to you that I had that huge episode of clearing for the collective when it came to human trafficking and things like that.
Yeah.
And when I went through that, it was so real and so it was like, I don't know, take one person's experience and multiply it times like 10,000. It was like,
Mm.
so when we do that kind of work, guys, we make the whole, what do you want to say, we correct things in the source field, we make it available to other people, we dissolve it,
Well, it's like if we're traveling, if we're traveling and we're all traveling in formation, if all of this stuff's like barnacles hanging off you, like whether it's through the air or through the water, whatever works better, but we're
right,
traveling along, And if you've got things hanging off you, it's creating drag. It's slowing you down. It's making you tilt to one side. It's just not. So the more you can remove, and even just removing one makes life better. Like for
Right.
you, not life better for the controllers, not life better for the government, not life better for the school system or the tax system, or like that's up to you if you want to play in all of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying making life better for you
Right.
as much as you can.
It's called
And
self-care. It's
yeah, and
actually
well,
just called self-care.
yeah, it is.
It
But the
is.
more of those you can remove from you, the less drag you will create as you go through
For
the air
everyone.
or the water. And if we're like, it's not just one, if we're like in this formation of, like ducks or geese flying through the air, if we're all in this big formation, well, if the less drag we have, the less drag we're creating for the goose flying behind us.
Right.
So, I mean, that's clearing for the collective in the way. Like if you're
Yeah.
right up front of the V and you're flying sloppy, everyone behind you copying your slipstream. Like,
Right.
and they're going to say, go to the back of the line and work. Like, you can, but the guys at
It's
the back,
like,
they're not doing the work. Like they're just kind of in everyone else's slipstream coasting along.
right.
And that's cool. But, they do to get to where they need to go as a group. They swap, they change because it's all, they've got it working as a functioning unit. But
Right.
every time you remove something from you, it makes your life easier. But everyone who's traveling in your slipstream gets it easier as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that would be an exercise to kind of sit there, not in ego, because ego could show you like you're a king and you've got this whole kingdom behind you kind of thing. But like, if you could just sit there in a very humble way and just say, well, who's behind me? Well, I mean, I know I've got 3 children behind me
Right.
at a bare minimum.
Right.
So every bit that I clean up on myself,
It's going to be affected on them.
everything
Yes.
that I can heal, then I'm not passing on.
Right.
Like, because we know we got stuff from our parents. And so, it's not, when you improve yourself, you improve it for everyone else who is relying on you. And there are people in here who are relying on you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's not a bad thing.
Well, and the way that, in different people that we both talked to over the last week, some people felt really called to actually clear patterns. I know my business partner, she was feeling some stuff around money and she just realized I got to clear this. And so she went and just got that done. But
Yeah.
we've also talked to someone from Telegram who was having these experiences, and she's considered it, but she's sitting in it. She's letting her inner being guide her as to what healing needs to take place, or if she has any big piece to, at this point, she's like, I'm not sure I have any really big pieces because I'm in a good space. I feel like there's not a lot affecting me, but she was able to at least get the message so that she would be acknowledging the fact that this template, this overlay, whatever you want to call it, bringing it to consciousness is to say, oh, okay, that makes sense. And yes, I see how that happened. And yes, and now I understand it. And now I can be like, okay, let it go. So everyone's going to have a different need, calling. And whatever you're called to do, if you're not called to do anything, it's probably because you're not supposed to do anything. I know this particular person was going to go off and do some clearing on the grid. That's her thing. So she's handling that part. I do believe a lot of us, especially anyone that's going to listen to this, is probably doing some clearing for the collective. It's probably, the forerunners, the ones that are here to do all that. And this would be a good time to wrap up the one piece about the healing piece. Okay. The healing piece that I went through, what I wanted to know after I realized I had this piece is how many people out there had that same piece, right? Like, oh, no one's ever going to love me the way he did, that fairy tale kind of thing. And so this person from the Telegram group, I asked her, because we were having a good conversation about it, I said, go in and look and see if that's something that you have. And this was after I did the clearing. So, and this was after I heard that the system-wide clearings were taking place And we started
Yeah.
to figure out as we cleared patterns. So here I had worked on a pattern and I wanted to find out, like, how are you affected by this pattern? And she basically said, I went and I thought about it and I looked into it. She said, I don't think I feel that way. And I was like, good,
Mm.
good. But then the
Yeah.
universe delivered up something to me. It was a
Mm.
message through her to me. That very day that I asked her the question, a man who she almost married, like she was waiting for a proposal from this guy. She thought this is the one that got away and everything, recontacted her out of nowhere on Facebook, sending her a picture of their date where she was, she said it was exactly what I was wearing the day that I thought he was going to propose to me. And
Oh,
she said, when
man.
I saw that picture and I saw that, she
Oh,
said, yeah, I knew instantly. No, I don't think that person who I think is my twin flame is the only one for me, because look at this person was pretty spectacular too. And it was like, when she told me that, I was like, that's the universe telling me,
mm.
because she
Yeah.
passed that story on to me. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's kind of an example about how when you feel called to do a piece of work, you really are doing it for the collective. I don't know how any of you see that, but I totally saw that as the universe communicating with me to say, do you see? Do you see the work? And not only that, but I've opened up. I've opened up to that feeling like, yeah, I might actually be drawing that anyone to me,
Mm.
right? Because now I no
Yeah.
longer have the belief that it's impossible. And
It becomes possible, and you're never going to have, well, you're rarely going to have something happen in your life that you feel is impossible, especially if you're constantly reinforcing that it's impossible. But then we have the story of the anaphylactic person who can change who they are in their head and suddenly eat a handful of peanuts with no drama. So
right.
it's like, of course it's possible. It's not probable, but it's very possible.
But you really have to believe something. And that's,
Yeah.
going back to, like, I love Bashar, and Bashar is always saying, you really, what you believe colors everything. And that's how, when you find traumatizing things, it's like, well, what must I believe in order for this to be true?
And the
And
question actually is, what has the trauma trained you to believe?
there you go. That's even better. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in this case,
And
it was
then,
like, once I started believing, really believing, then you're going to create that. But how can you
yeah,
create that if you really don't believe it, even if you say you believe it, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because you can say, you could say until the cows come home, you believe you can fly and jump off the roof and you're going to hit the ground pretty hard. But that one guy could say he believes he's not going to be anaphylactic to peanuts. And as soon as he eats one, he'll need an EpiPen.
Mm-hmm.
But that same body can eat peanuts when it actually believes that it's not allergic to them.
Because you're talking about multiple personalities.
Yeah, at a cellular level in a multiple personality. So belief is more than, well, I just sat with it and I said I believed it. And you're like, yeah, you don't actually believe it though.
Right.
You're
It's
jumping
not
off
in
the
every.
roof going, it'll
Mhm.
be interesting if I can fly, but you don't believe you can fly. Like, because there's nothing has informed you that humans can just fly in this realm.
You'd
Whereas
have to
if you
believe.
thought, and what's interesting, that what leads into this is the YouTube, it seems very off topic, but the YouTube phenomenon of point of view videos of
Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
like big wave surfing, or like, I remember when the first, I grew up on motorbikes. I remember when the first motorbike guy did a backflip on a bike. He went around a big loop, he did it like a jump, and he did a backflip on the jump. And it was mind blowing. They've been doing big jumps forever and breaking things and killing people and craziness. He pulled off a backflip. No one thought he could do it. And he trained and he trained and he trained and he trained and he trained. It's like the 4-minute mile, right? He pulled off this backflip and it was multi-million-dollar Red Bull deal instantly. Like, he was just hero of the day. Now you've got kids on mini bikes doing double backflips just on the weekend.
Right.
Because they saw that it's possible. And once they saw that it was possible, they went, oh, I can do that. Of course I can.
Right.
Because they didn't have to they didn't have to believe out of thin air. They actually saw someone do it and they went, well, now I know that that is possible for a human. I don't just have to believe in myself some crazy weird thing. And so, mountain bike riding, kite surfing, all of this sport stuff, you watch it now and you see what they're doing, and it almost seems inhuman what these people can do, because they've it's like a knock-on effect of this person does that, then the next person does that, and that because they've seen the person do it so many times on the screen, especially with the camera on the chest or the camera on the head, so it actually looks like you're doing it as you watch.
Right.
And it informs the brain, and the brain's like, well, it's almost like we're doing it. The brain just believes it's doing it. It's a totally possible thing.
I'll tell you what, it goes hand in hand with ascension. It goes hand in hand with awakening, because really what we're doing is we're dropping the beliefs. That's what's happening. Like, this is just one template. If you look at the twin flame, overlay, if you want to call it that, coordinated maneuver. When we stop, when we drop the beliefs that create shit for us, and we replace them with other beliefs, there's no limit to what we can do. But we're going through the process of that, actually, so we can walk out of here. And we're not doing it alone, because we are out there and we are in here and we are all over the place. And and so we don't have to. It's like, a lot of people are like, we've done this work. I know a lot of my friends are like, oh, I'm tired of this work. I've done so much work. And it's like, I think that what's changing now is that it's like you said, Hamish, it's like we had to work so hard because we were so damn traumatized. Right?
Exactly. And that's why they traumatized us. That was the whole point.
But if you believe like I do, and I'm pretty sure you believe this too, we've gotten to a place where a lot of that stuff is being removed from the realm. A lot of the only things that are starting to be left, maybe some overlays that are being dissolved in our templates, but they're our own programs and our own thoughts. It's our own little prison. So we're getting ourselves out of that. And how are we doing it? Right.
Yeah. And something I noticed yesterday that someone brought up from 2016 in an old video I was watching, and it really hit home today, even harder than it did in 2016, is like, where are all the dead bodies from these disasters? And it was just one in particular, but it was like, well, how could you say the world's getting better, or it's getting like this? It's getting worse. It's like, we can see the behavior. We're shown and you look at it and you go, yeah, we're shown and we're told it's getting worse. Where are the bodies again?
Yeah.
Like, there's no actual fallout. There's mental and emotional fallout. There's traumatization fallout from these events, from us witnessing them.
What we think we're witnessing.
Through them.
Yeah.
We think we're witnessing them. Like, are they even happening? We don't even know they're bloody happening, half of them. Or are they as big as they say they are? Or what? Where are all the dead bodies? Well, funnily enough, the body count doesn't exist. When you go to the cemetery, there aren't extra graves there. So where did they bury all the people from that big accident? Well, we don't actually know. But then the flip side of that being, now there's a shortage of bodies. Like, it seems like a whole heap of people have just left. Every time you go to get a car worked on, you go to get any work done,
it's like there's nobody manning this. There's no one. There's nobody there.
Yeah. Everyone's short of staff. Everyone's short. And so, like, all these bodies have left.
Right.
But it's like, no one's even talking about that.
Right.
But then all the people die in this terribly traumatic thing. And it's like, there aren't any bodies, though. No one's, where are the bodies buried? Well, the cemeteries aren't actually. So there's something really weird going on here. And it's mostly, like, this is not to say that there isn't physical trauma still going on, because there absolutely is. But at the moment, or at least since 2016, it seems like most of the trauma has been mental, emotional trauma.
Right. And a lot of it has been created, like literally created through the television and through, right? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see, there's this many dead bodies, and then the next one, there's got to be this many. And then, Like the events have to keep getting bigger and bigger to grab our imagination, but we still don't even know if the events, like even if they're happening, they do seem to be fairly small scale, the fallout from the event, because
Right.
in 2 days it just rolls on and
We're
we're
onto
back to normal.
something else. Right.
So
Right.
there's something really screwy going on with all of it at the moment, which, I mean, if there is something really screwy going on with the program and it's all wonking a bit, well, that's a perfect opportunity to, while it's all off balance, get in and get yourself together a bit
Right.
more and really have a good look at what you've got and what could
Right.
be cleaned out and what you could streamline. And because when you do that, it just clears everything. It clears your emotions, it clears your headspace. You can think better, you can act better for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and you can make better decisions.
Yeah. Yep. It's probably a good place. I mean, we've talked about the healing. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that we were thinking about or talking about.
Oh, I mean,
Um,
it's that kind of day. It's like
I know.
everything's kind of everywhere, but yeah.
That's how I felt too. It's like I wasn't sure this video was gonna happen because it was just kind of like, how do you take so much shift and so much change? And this is all stuff that, we've kind of gone through over the last 7 to 9 days. It's not that long, but we've actually come to a place where I can see this really big overlay pattern that probably hit 200,000. People talk about the 144, there were 144,000 twin flame pairs, whatever. I don't know any numbers, but all I know is
Yeah.
that I think that there were a lot more people that have been hit with a lot more overlays than just this
Oh
throughout
yeah.
throughout this period of ascension. So they're going to
Mm,
get you any which way to Sunday. And
mm.
that's okay. That's okay, because guess what? We're stronger than they are. We're creator beings, and we can create our way out of this, and we are doing that right now. So
Exactly.
I guess the only thing I would say to wrap up, and then you can say whatever you want to say, is if you've been listening and you resonate with the twin flame situation and it's turned on some lights for you, I guess the only thing that I would ask you is just to go inside and say, has there been any aftermath for you? Has there been
Mm.
any things that you live with on a day-to-day basis that you might not have even thought about living with if you weren't in this connection? How has it impacted you? How is it impacting you now? Are you living your fullest, happiest, healthiest life? um do you feel like you're open to any new relationships or whatever? Just how are you feeling inside? If you
Mm.
feel good and you feel like you've healed, you might come up with just a couple things. Oh, wow, I didn't realize this, or oh, I didn't realize that, but I feel good, and I feel like I'm in a better space, or at least in the same kind of space I was before. If you find that there's some things that you're having a hard time with moving on, even like I'm thinking of a really good friend of mine who just reached out to me. In fact, she just watched our video, the last video we did, and she reached out to me and she's like, I don't know what the fuck to believe. She's just like, but she is
Join the club.
someone. Yes, but she is someone that is definitely going through trauma. She's definitely been through several where she feels like she's reliving the trauma again and again with new partners, and she's opening herself up to some other kind of treatment. I don't know, rapid eye, some kind of therapy of some kind. I'm not really sure, and I'm going to talk to her. But if you're in a space where this is affecting your life, that's the main people that we know are probably likely supposed to clear this stuff. I had that
Yeah.
in my space, and I looked it in the eye and I said, this is for my better good. And even though there's a piece of me that doesn't want to do this, because who wants to unattach from something you've been attached to for so long? Who wants to give up the dream, if you will? Oh, but it's going to get better. Oh, but it's one day that Prince Charming is going to be at my door, kind of thing. Um,
Mm.
I was willing to give up that for what's real.
Yeah.
And what's real for you may be that Prince Charming is that person, and you will end up with that person. And that may be the result of you actually going in and doing the deeper seated work. You said something to me, Hamish, that really, it put me so much at ease. And that is, when this is all said and done, and we are on the other side of this, and we've walked out of this false matrix, and we are back in the real, what do you want to say, an uninterfered with space where we can really, really know who we are and put on all our superpowers again. Who's meant for you is going to be there, and who's not won't. And when you said that to me, what it did was, is first of all, it made me not judge my own situation, because we don't really know. We only think we know. And it's just our perspective. And I don't know my situation. Maybe this is my Prince Charming, and this Prince Charming is just like, it's just not worked out very well. But I'm open to what's on the other side of that door. But in the meantime, I'm walking out of here in my wholeness, and I'm going to walk out of here as unencumbered by the things that harm the birds behind me. And I encourage you, if you feel called to do that work for your betterment, this isn't like, oh, sacrifice for the collective or anything, but if you feel, then go in and look inside, go in and look inside. And if you need a hand up, I'm just going to tell you, Hamish is a good man to give you a hand up. Actually, I've been some people a hand up too this week, and I'm learning a lot more just from you.
I mean, that's what I always do in my sessions, is, apart from telling people you can do it yourself, it's like you actually do the work. I'm not doing any of the work for anyone who I'm doing a session with. They're doing the work, and I'm guiding. But as I'm guiding, I'm teaching you how to do it yourself. And so there are then, I mean, after you did your first session with me, a day later, you went and you did a whole session on yourself in the shower. I brought another thing up, and you were like, "You're right, I can do it on my own." I'm like, "Yeah, you can." And some things are better to do with someone else, because I know it adds more grounding, it adds more weight. It just feels like they can hold space for you, and you can concentrate a bit more on what you need to do. But other things you can do perfectly adequately on your own, and it's only the fear and the idea that you couldn't do it, or you'll get it wrong somehow, is what stops you from doing it. So
I want to address that.
You can't get it wrong. Yeah.
I want to address that, because there's something that you taught me. I know people who think that it's a really bad thing that we make shit up in our heads, that that none of this is real, that it's all hallucinations, that, people are hallucinating and they're talking to each other and confirming each other's hallucinations, that none of that's real. But I want you to speak to that. What you remember what you were kind of saying to me?
Yeah, I said there'd be two people standing there, and I point up in the sky and say, "Can you see that? Can you see that spaceship up there?" And the other person would say, "You're crazy, you're hallucinating." But the person who can see the spaceship would just say, "No, you're just blind." And so we can pare all of this back and go, all of this is made up in your head. It's all psychosomatic. You can get all Young and what's his name, psychology, psychiatry about it, and go like, well, look, the wall and the door are real. You can't walk through the door or the wall. You'll hit it. That's real. All this other stuff's just make believe. And then you have an experience where a being walks through the wall in front of you and then just disappears in front of you. And then you say to yourself, so what's actually real? And the person next to you says, "Oh, you're hallucinating. You just made that up in your head." But I saw it. And so I'm not hallucinating. You're just blind. And I mean, so that's slippery. You've got to be a bit careful with that. But if your hallucination is something that's actually benefiting your life and the life of others around you, then keep hallucinating. Keep doing it. If there's benefit to it, if it's harming your life and it's harming others around you, then it's not beneficial. And that would be more like what a doctor would call a hallucination. It's you're making it up and it's damaging people. But what if you were making up stuff and it was helping you and helping other people.
Well, and that's what you got into when we were talking about the healing sessions, is it's like you may, like, for example, the little girl, that little
Mm.
girl may never have even existed. But if my
Nope.
mind could explain the trauma in a way that my brain would understand, if my higher being knows how to work to reprogram the brain or whatever, it doesn't matter if it's
It,
real.
because it
It's
worked.
healing you anyways.
It worked. So who
Yes.
cares? Like
Right.
if it's make believe and it worked and it actually really tangibly worked. Like it's not like, oh, it worked, I'm healed now, unicorns and
And
fairy
then
dust. Like
next,
it's a gut punch. Like when
you
you
know,
feel it, it's visceral. It works. And
because it
so
works at the energy level, it works at the very essence, the core
mm,
essence of, say, that aspect of you. And
yeah.
it puts it in some kind of logical order. So yeah, does it matter whether it actually happened, if there was actually a little girl and it doesn't matter. My inner being was working with us to give me a construct, real or imagined, doesn't matter. It's a story. It's
Yeah.
a story
The
that I
healing
can
story.
relate to, that was a healing story for me.
It's the healing story.
I could have just as easily had Prince Charming come into the gym. I would say the gym because that's the only place I ever go. I could have Prince Charming come into the gym and sweep me off my feet, and that would heal me. Who says I
Yeah.
have to go heal through trauma?
Yeah,
You see what
exactly.
I'm saying? It's a
That's
story.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And so
Yeah.
you don't need because I mean what's first of all, like we're saying, what's real? Like, of course, if this whole thing is a hologram and if this whole thing is a metaphor, then if you're going to use a metaphor that heals you and it heals you in such a visceral way, and we're talking about emotional stuff here, but I've used these techniques to heal physical ailments in people. Or,
Right.
I didn't heal, they healed.
Right.
I've used these techniques to help people heal physical ailments in themselves, and the physical healing came through.
Right.
So I don't care if it's make believe,
Right.
and neither do they, because they got a physical healing from it. What
Right.
matters is the result.
Yes. Yep. And we're for results because we got to get out of here. Who knows? I mean, I always say that. I'm just kind of kidding because I don't even know what that looks like, but I do know that it looks a lot different than where we've been for a long time. And I'm very much looking forward to the big parties that we have when we are completely in our freedom, true freedom.
And
So,
well, out of here doesn't have to mean out of this town or city or world, or out of here just means out of this energetic situation we find ourselves in. We
right,
find ourselves in an oppressive, energetic, emotional, and physical situation, and we want to be out of that.
right. We want
That's
to be
it. And that,
free.
yeah, and people can run that template as far out as to say, look, even nature is an oppressive. Look at the way it's dog eat
Dog eat
dog,
dog. That's what came
and
to me too.
yeah, and it eats
Dog eat
itself. And
dog.
I'm like, you're not going to get an argument out of me there. Like trauma, whatever's going on here at the moment in this thing that I certainly grew up in.
It's all trauma.
Trauma is the way everything runs, and that's a
Yes.
shit system.
And we want out. So we want to go someplace that's trauma free.
Yeah. And so you will get no argument out of me on that basis of, well, it's right down to the bedrock here. I'm like, yeah, it is.
It is.
And so when we say out of here, what we mean is
we want to go to the right side up.
Yeah, we want to be out of a trauma-based system, however that looks and however that works. And that's the end game. And if we get there by reducing or dealing with the trauma and our trauma responses along the way, which I think we might, that's the only reason I'm doing this work. I mean, I grew up as a farmer. I wasn't doing this stuff.
Right.
Like, and a family generational farmer, the easiest thing in the world would have been for me to keep doing that.
Right.
But I saw the traumatization of this place and how it worked from a bedrock level all the way up and from the top level all the way down. And I went, that's a bit shit. That doesn't feel like home to me. That feels like crap. What do we do about this? Do we need to bring home in? Do we need to get ourselves out? I still don't know how that works or what that looks like. But what I do know is we get to a place where we can work it out by healing the trauma in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not so much helping other people to heal their trauma as teaching them how to heal that little bit of trauma and all the rest of it.
Right.
I don't want to be the one that you have to come to every time to fix it.
I've never been that way. Yep.
No, I just want to teach people how to do it, because I think if the more people know how to heal their trauma, then they'll be able to handle the trauma because we know it keeps getting reinforced, like it's getting reinforced daily with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
If you know how to heal the trauma that you've been through, then you'll have a better handle on how to emotionally and mentally handle any trauma that's coming in the moment.
Right.
And
you don't create more of it.
You don't create more, because it's people traumatized people traumatizing other people.
Yep.
And so we've got to start somewhere with this. And the whole astrological system might be built on traumatizing people like that. You're still not going to get an argument out of me. Yes. And so become someone who can't be traumatized.
Right.
And then
you are the answer.
Even if you're not out of the system, at least you're out of the grip of the traumatization of the system. And that's always been my thing, is the only way to truly make yourself someone who can't be hurt by that is to make yourself someone who can't be hurt by that. Like that actually, you've turned yourself into a brand new being where that thing can't get you anymore. Like I can now, if you want to be able to not be poisoned by cyanide, you've got to be a sort of person who can drink cyanide without getting poisoned.
Right.
And that's just the kind of template I work on with the trauma stuff, is to get to the point where you are untraumatizable.
Right. Well, and that's bringing home here.
Yeah.
Because you are uncorruptible.
Yep.
And the other
side. It doesn't matter what's going on around you. Nothing can get you.
Incorruptible.
And if you can get to that place yourself, then you can teach other people to get to that place. It's not just about you being selfish. It's about going, no. Let's all, as many of us as possible, get to the point where
the biggest thing
get us.
Is doing this work is the most selfless thing you can do. Like people might really not understand that doing the work inside of yourself is just the gift. It's not just it's not a selfish thing at all.
No, it's a gift.
It's a gift really for the whole world. And I don't know. I guess it's just, I've always seen it as being the most important thing, is just becoming that being. It's the best thing you can do for anyone, all your loved ones, all the things, people work so hard to make sure their kids have this and have that. And it's like, you find yourself in a space where you are a pillar of stability. You watch those children just flourish.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going with all this. We could just talk forever, couldn't we? We'll probably wrap it up. We'll wrap this one up. Who knows? Maybe we'll come back for another video. Maybe we'll even talk about other things, because I really do feel like the twin flame thing, it's wrapping itself up. People are doing the work. People are being called to do it. And it's going to be, does not mean that sacred counterparts are going away, people. It doesn't mean that true love and real intimate relationships are going anywhere. It just means that the false patterns are falling away so that we don't get in the traps of the traumatization and all that stuff.
And even if you're still stuck in this place where the asteroids keep spinning and the planets keep going around, and that situation pops up again, it's not going to catch you, because you can't be traumatized in that way anymore. You see
it's that's the beauty of it, guys. Oh my God, the PTSD is being PTSD. Did I say it right? Remember, I always say it wrong. But I mean, yes. Oh God, it feels good. So anyways, all right. Well, we'll leave it there, you guys. Thanks for watching. And I'll leave links, to Hamish and I don't know, whatever else we've talked about. There will be a link below for you if you need any extra stuff. So until next time, we'll just say goodbye. Namaste. Bye. you.